Hi everybody and welcome to I Like Cruise Ships, the YouTube channel, and welcome to a new video and welcome to a new question and answer video. If you're a subscriber to the channel, you probably know that there's other question and answers here in the channel and a playlist that I put together as well if you might want to watch some more previously asked questions. Now today's question is actually from a subscriber, which is kind of neat. Barbara Ann Rayborn. She posted a question in one of the other question and answer videos. I thought I'd follow up and answer it here for you. So Barbara asked, how long is a stay working length of time on the ship for crew? Do crew return to the same ship every time they come back to work? Now, Barbara, this is kind of an interesting question, and I'll just give you my take and my answer. Now, of course, every crew member will have a slightly different situation, I guess, but it's fairly standard across the board from the captain, the officers, staff and crew on board. It's a fairly standard answer though. Now, how long do crew work on the ship? Now, the contract lengths vary from 3 months to 9 or 10 months, depending on the position that you work on board. Now, 3 or 4 month contracts are fairly typical of most of the officers on board, particularly the deck and engine officers, or what we call watchkeeping officers, and the senior management, like the hotel director, housekeeping manager, some of the restaurant managers have shorter contracts. Now, typically for staff and crew on board, the contract lengths tend to vary between 6 months to 8 or 9 months. Now, depending again on the position that you work in. For me, I was working in the shops on board and still do for the past 20 years. And when I first started on ships, the contract length was 9 months. Then they reduced it to 8 months. And at the moment, the current contract length is 6 months. Now, of course, with everything going on the last year and a half, there's a little bit of leeway given with the ability to sign on and off with obviously the ships being in or out of service at the moment. But pretty much your contract length, where it's typically 6 months, you'd sign on the ship, and then even prior to boarding the ship, you'd know your sign-on date and you'll know your sign-off date. Now, depending on the ship's itinerary, the actual exact date may not end on, let's say, a Miami home port day or Galveston or Charleston or wherever the ship is. So it may differ 1 or 2 days of the calendar if you're doing a 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 day cruise. So typically though, you'd know your sign-off date when you sign on, and then basically where the ship might be, if it's in the same home port or if it's repositioned the ship, like it went to Alaska or Hawaii or changed from, say, Galveston to Port Canaveral. You'd sign off in wherever that home port is at the end of your contract length. So typically 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Now, generally there's not as many 8 or 9 month contracts any longer. The cruise lines realize that towards the end of your 6 or 7 months, there's a little bit of burnout and a little bit of, I don't know what to say, a little bit of, routine to what you're doing, and crew members tend to just get tired. Although we may not ever show it, or we do show it, but by the end of that 8 or 9 months, there's just a point where you kind of reach your limit and you just want to go home. Now, it's very interesting. We always have this thing, right? So when you're at home, you want to be on the ship. When you're on the ship, you want to be at home. Pretty much most crew members that have done, I'm going to say at least a few years, 5 years or longer, it becomes very much a job and a career for some people. And you become accustomed to your vacation time and your contract time. So when you're on the ship, you're at work. When you're at home, you're at home. Simple. And you kind of know your return dates. Now, typically when crew members sign off, they'll have a return date and a return ship. Now, depending on the position you have on the ship, it's going to vary a little bit, but let's say Carnival's crew members like cabin stewards, waiters, bartenders, cooks, there is a list that they create, typically a month or so before you leave, or up to 2 months sometimes, that you can see your sign-off date, what port it is, what is your return date, and then what the return ship is. Now, of course, you do have an option to go and request to to come back to the same ship. And you do have an option to either extend or reduce your contract length. The cruise lines really want to keep to a schedule. Obviously, if you think of Carnival as 20 or more ships, or even Royal Caribbean, and then let's say 1,000 crew on every ship, it's very much a jigsaw puzzle of how they schedule the crew members. So the cruise line would really like to keep to that kind of schedule that they've got, where that's your sign-off, that's your ship, that's your return date, that's your return ship, and where people request, the cruise line will try and accommodate it. Now, if you do want to come back to the same ship as well, you can make a request to come back. Now, what's important is the sign-on dates and sign-off dates will be very determined by your position. So if you're a cabin steward and sign off, a cabin steward will sign on in your place. They're not going to sign off 5 cabin stewards and bring 5 cooks, because they've got to kind of keep the balance of the employees amongst all the departments. Does that make sense? So if you're wanting to come back to the same ship, you'd have to come back into that same position when there's a free place. If they've allocated to another ship, that's because that cabin steward, for instance, position has come up on that ship for that date. Does that make sense? I hope I'm not confusing it too much. So crew members do have a chance to request ships, particularly if you might be in a relationship and you're a couple. You can request couples to come back to the same ship. They do try their best to accommodate it. Obviously, it's a little bit of moving around, and it can take a little bit of time for that request to go to shoreside and then come back again. For the shops on board, we do tend to know our next ship when we sign off, but it can change a little bit, again, depending on the position. I work in the liquor store on board, so if you think of the duty-free shops on the ship, typically there's only 1 or 2 people that work in that part of the shops. So I don't work in the jewelry or the watch section or the perfume section. So the company that I work for now are trying to hire the person to that position rather than just coming on as a general shop staff member and work anywhere in the shops. They want to bring a jewelry specialist into that jewelry position. So when one signs off or goes home, another one will come and replace them. It won't be a t-shirt guy replacing a jeweler, because it just won't fit the kind of dynamic of the shops. Does that make sense? Yeah, so crew members do have that chance to request new ships or new... also, when a new ship is launched, like the Mardi Gras recently, or for instance, I was on the Horizon inaugural, the company I work for and the cruise line pretty much handpick the people that will go on to the inaugural cruises, because they just, not to sort of put me on a pedestal, but they choose the best of the best to go on to that new ship. So when it's launched and comes out right from the shipyard, it can go right into operations and everybody knows their role. They're not going to tend to bring too many what's called new hires on board a new ship, because they're not going to be familiar with the ship, the layout. It does take a little bit of a while to get used to, the size of the ship, where you work, where you live on the ship, the routine of working. So they want that. For instance, with the Horizon, when it launched, it came from the shipyard in Italy. We sailed over to Barcelona, and within, let's say, 3 days or 4 days, I think it was, we were literally having the first guest come on the ship and do the first voyage in Europe. So we needed to be ready to go from that first few days of leaving the shipyard. So even on those few days crossing from Italy to Spain, they wanted to get the restaurants running, so they opened them up for crew to dine so that the waiters could just basically get comfortable with the operation of the ship. So they don't necessarily bring on any new or first contractors onto established new ships. Does that make sense? So yeah, that's a little bit more detailed. These videos do run a little bit longer, so I hope it comes across as the answer you'd like. Barbara, thanks very much as a subscriber to the channel, and thanks for posting a comment. I hope it was a good answer. And to anybody that's new watching these, you're going to kind of love or hate them, I think. Pretty much from the few that I've made in the last week, there's a lot of positive feedback, a lot of thumbs up, a lot of comments, and a lot of views. So that does sort of prove to me that they kind of, people enjoy watching them. So yeah, thanks for watching I Like Cruise Ships, the YouTube channel. Oh, there we go. I was just thinking if it went off or not. I moved my mouse over here to keep the from timing out. So I've put a new video for you to watch over here so you can check out something new. Post a comment, thumbs up, thumbs down. It's up to you. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe away. That way you'll see new videos when they come out. Thanks for watching, everybody. And from I Like Cruise Ships, bye for now.